Alright, hello and welcome to the video. So, a lot of people will probably recognise this very overexposed location I'm currently in. This location was the last place I ever filmed my M2 competition. That was the goodbye video where I then sold it and replaced it with this, a 718 Cayman GT4. I don't have an M2 to kind of sit in the background of this video. You can see by the title we're talking about the new G87 M2. I don't have an M2 to sit in the background, but I wanted you guys to have something nice to look at anyway because we're talking about cars. So, this is just going to be the usual format, a discussion video, me just kind of giving my viewpoints, my opinions on some of the reviews and stuff I've read about the new M2. I'm very excited to see what the car's going to be like. I'm sure I'll get behind the wheel of the M2 at some point. Maybe the kind guys at Cotswold BMW will hook me up and I can get behind the wheel of them. As always, they've always been brilliant. They got me behind the M240i and the G series M4 as well, so maybe they'll sort me out at some point and I can try it out. But at the moment, with the limited information that's out there, I thought I'd just kind of hop on here in front of the camera. We can maybe have a little discussion, see if maybe the things I'm going to talk about and the points I'm going to make on that I've written down on my notes on my phone, let me know if you kind of think the same thing or disagree in the comments below. It'd be interesting to see, and maybe when the car is shipping in, I think Joe Achilles said in his review that they'd be shipping around about March, or they'd be in the showrooms around about February, March time. Maybe you can watch back this video and see some of the things that I've said today, if maybe I was right or wrong, etc, etc. So, hello, welcome to the video. Let's dive right into it. Right, so first of all, I think on YouTube, there were only two YouTubers, Joe Achilles and Shmee150, that actually got invited out to Australia to drive the new M2. Competition, base model, who knows at this point, right? Joe Achilles said that they would be probably in the showrooms and they would be shipping in about February, March next year, so looking forward to that very much. But as you can see in a lot of the spy shots or the overlay shots from the BMW press team and from Joe Achilles' videos and Shmee's as well, you can see that there's a new dash in the M2. So BMW very quietly updated the interior on the new M240i. It basically now looks like a Mercedes A-Class or a Mercedes E-Class, where it's basically one big massive screen, iPad looking thing from the gauge cluster and the infotainment. It's one big like panel screen now. They updated that in the M240i very, very quietly. So a lot of people who have M240i's, people such as R44 Performance, Motec, they've now actually got the old interior where they've got kind of the M135i style interior where you've got a digital dash and a separate screen as an infotainment. If you now have an M240i on order and it's going to arrive around about September time, you will receive the big massive A-Class Mercedes interior where it's just one big screen. Me personally, my opinion, not a fan of it. I get it. BMW have kind of upgraded their interiors, you know, to make them more appealing to non-performance people. You know, if you buy a regular 2 Series, you're now going to have a very, very sexy interior, which is going to draw in a lot of customers. But for us petrol heads, prefer the analog style. You know, Porsche do it very well. They've still got the analog rev meter, the rev counter, etc, etc. So, me personally, I actually think, although on the used market, the new 240i's with the new interiors will sell for more, because they'll be newer cars, I think a lot of petrol heads might actually prefer the old one. Going off on tangent there, it means that the newer incoming M2, as you can see from the spy shots, has that massive iPad double screen thing. And I think for an M car, you know, something that's very driver focused, typically BMW M are very good at making driver focused, you know, track cars. Me personally, I'm not a fan of it. A little bit annoyed, but it is what it is. It's also very interesting to see that BMW invited Joe and Shmee out to Austria and they drove the cars on track. That's very promising to see. It actually means that BMW M have gone out and they've treated this car as a track car. They know their customers are going to be taking it on track and they want to showcase the ability of the car out on track. So that's a really positive thing. I'm really glad that they've done that. It's just nice to see that they're recognizing their customer loyal base, their fan base, etc, etc. So you've got the new dash, you've also got the bucket seats as well. You've got the bucket seats straight out of the M3 and the M4, the new G series. You've also got the bucket seats in the new M5 CS. So those obviously, these bucket seats are obviously the kind of new track focused seats going forward that obviously we're going to start seeing in all the M cars. You can still spec the comfort seats, which, knowing from my old M2 competition, they held me very, very well. So these comfort seats are obviously probably going to be a kind of a version 2, a development from those ones. They still will be comfortable, and I suspect they'll still hold you very well. But if you're going to be doing a lot of track work, go for the buckets. They look very, very sexy. They actually recline, unlike the Porsche ones where they're fixed. Again, my problem with bucket seats is the side bolsters always come up very, very high. So as you're getting into the car, they always dig into your thigh and they're a little bit annoying. So I know a few people who daily their buckets, M cars and Porsche owners, etc, etc. So it's obviously doable. Yeah, it's great to see that they're offering them in the new M2. So from an interior standpoint, there's obviously a nice progression there, but the dash, yeah, not a big fan at all. Let's talk about the exterior a little bit as well. Obviously it was very covered up, it's camouflaged. In the past we've always seen cars kind of camouflaged in a kind of black and white camouflage. It's nice to see that manufacturers are now having a little bit of fun with it. We saw with the A-Class, they kind of had it in loads of different colours. They're now doing it the same with the M2. It's loads of different blues and reds, etc, etc. You can kind of see, and I'll overlay some screenshots, etc, that the car is, oh, there's an M2 that's just driven past over there. You can see that it's going to be very, very wide. The front end, especially in Shmee's video, it looks pretty wide. It doesn't have the new grille in the G series M3, M4, which a lot of people are very happy about because they still hate that Bugs Bunny teeth. Me personally, I've gotten used to it now. When I see it, to be honest, I would probably buy an M3, M4, the new one. I think it looks perfectly fine. If they had it on the M2, people will get used to it. The styling and the looks, we know the M240i still is kind of like a Marmite thing. Some people like it, some people don't. Honestly, I think over time, people will get used to it. You'll get used to the looks, and you'll just get over it. A lot of people didn't like 720Ss, McLarens, when they first came out. Hey, you know, people love them now. So I think kind of looks just take a while to get used to certain things. But from what we can see with this camouflaged M2, it looks very wide. You've kind of got you've still got that issue with kind of the back box udder sort of thing. It's not hanging as much as my M2 competition was, but we can see it on the M3, M4 that's currently driving around today. It does hang quite low and you can see it sticking out at the bottom of the diffuser. So it is what it is. I mean, probably not so bad that you have to spray it back black like my old one, but it's hanging there anyway. It also now comes with a carbon roof and adaptive suspension. So both of these things we saw on the M2 CS. And in my personal opinion, the M2 CS was actually the car that the M2 should always have been. You know, the base M3 and M4 of the F series had a carbon roof and it had adaptive suspension, and BMW M left those features out until you got to the CS level, and that should have been in the standard M2 from the very beginning. So it's nice to see that they've now put that into the new G series, the G87 M2. So starting from the bottom, you've got your adaptives and your carbon roof. It's now maybe more of a truer M car than the old F87. Last but not least, we still don't know if it's going to be a competition or if they're going to do a base model. If we follow kind of the general trend that we go with typically with BMW M, M3, M4, etc. I imagine, I mean, Joe and Shmee both drove a automatic ZF gearbox, which we can assume it was a ZF. I don't think they actually said it was a ZF. And they drive a manual as well. If we do kind of, I really hope that the UK brings the manual car to the, BMW brings the manual car to the UK. My car's manual, It's my first manual performance car, my 718, and I've fallen in love with it. And I honestly believe it depends on kind of what kind of manual box you're driving, but if I were to buy a G87 M2, I would probably get it in a manual, because this has just been fantastic in a manual. So I do hope they bring in a manual M2 to the UK, but if they do follow suit with the M3, M4, the base model, if they do create a base M2, will be a manual, and the competition will be the ZF. I really hope they don't do that, but I do think that they'll just go straight to the competition, and they'll sell the competition in the UK, and they won't sell a base model in the UK. So that's an interesting take to see, but we'll see how it goes with that. So third and final point, driving impressions. This is the first time we've actually seen the car driving. We've seen it kind of go around the Nürburgring by spy shots, etc. We've heard, I've heard anyway, certainly certain things that are being reported in magazines, etc., etc. But this is the first time where a reviewer and a YouTuber has been able to get behind the car and give us their first impressions, the driving experience of the car. And it's really good to see that it's positive. I mean, it's BMW M. When is it ever going to be a bad car? We already know that my old M2 was a fantastic car, and I think a lot of the problems with this new car is that it's going to be very hard to beat. The DCT gearbox, although was very, very clunky, gave it a lot of character. It was clunky, it kind of rabbit hopped when you were driving around at slow speeds, but the gear shifts were very, very fast, they were very aggressive, and it just kind of gave it character. I've driven, the G82 M4 competition, and at low speeds the ZF gearbox is fantastic. It's very smooth. My M140 was very smooth, but I did find that when you're shifting, they're very slow. You kind of get used to it after a while. When I got used to it after driving the G82 M4, when I got back in my M2, I thought it was very clunky. But as with new cars, as they kind of slowly develop, new cars always get, in a sense, softer. As they kind of perfect them more and more, they get better on track. As a driving capability, they get better and better, they get faster, they can handle, suspension, etc., etc. But the trade-off with that is that often you lose the character of cars as well, and I feel like the F series M2 had so much character about it, it was very ASBO, that I'm worried that the new GM2 might be a little bit too soft. Not in terms of being fast and aggressive, but soft where you lose that character, and it's so good that it might be a little bit dull. So I think a lot of M2 owners at the moment are going to have a very tough decision about whether they should sell their current F series M2 and upgrade to the G series M2, and we can talk about price in a second. But when something was so good, it's almost very hard to beat that. And I'm sure, as normal trends typically go with BMW, the new M car is always better, or if not the same as the CS version before it. We know it's going to be very good. And although there weren't any kind of power figures or torque figures given to us, I think we're going to be looking at around about 450 bhp on the new G series M2, because on the CS it was around about that as well. So it will have to be the same or equal. I want to know how that power is delivered as well. So in my M2, the F series M2, the power kind of died off around about at the top end. The way it was mapped was quite NA mapped, because they didn't, with the turbos, a lot of the early M cars, the drivers were wrapping them around trees because the torque was so much low down that it was very hard to kind of control. So with the M2s, kind of the latest generation of the S55, BMW M had kind of mapped those cars to have a lot more of a naturally aspirated feel, so not all the torque was dumped at the very bottom, but the power did die at the very top. And I'd been out in cars that had been stage 1 mapped, which is, just a load of code, it's just an ECU bit of code, and the power went all the way to redline. And so I'm interested to see what this G series M2 is going to be like, and how they've mapped that car Is it again going to be very naturally aspirated mapped where the power goes all the way up to redline, it's pretty much nothing at the bottom, or is it going to have a lot of mid-end torque, kind of like the M240i? So that will be very interesting to see also. Talking about the weight, it's about 1,700 kilos. That's quite a heavy car. I mean, I'm very spoiled in the fact that I've driven this now, and every car to me now seems very, very heavy, but it's heavier than the old F-Series M2 that I owned as well. So the car is now heavier. By adding weight, you need more power in order to keep that car moving quicker. So even though on paper, seeing that the new car might be more powerful, by being heavier, it might mean that it actually feels the same in terms of speed. So that'll be very interesting too. But Shmee talked about how the cornering capability actually felt very nimble, and there's not actually anything new that I felt like as I was watching the reviews. I didn't feel like I'd actually learned anything new. We always know that the M2 is basically the M3, M4, but in a shorter wheelbase, more nimble, more playful and more fun. It's always had traditionally the same engine, the same gearbox, the same wheels, the same seats, etc, etc, but it's a more nimble, shorter wheelbase car and more fun, slightly detuned. So I kind of knew that, and watching the videos kind of confirmed it. But that's going to be very interesting as well. How is the power and the weight of the new car actually going to feel when you're driving it? Is it going to be as fun to drive as the old F-Series M2? And there's one interesting thing as well about the manual gearbox. When both Joe and Shmee were shifting the cars and the manual gearbox, there was this weird thumping sound pumped through the speakers at every gear change. It kind of sounded, I know it's kind of made to make the gearbox sound mechanical, but I didn't really like it. This weird thumping sound. I'll put an overlay clip or something, or I'll tell you where to go put a timestamp or something in one of their videos, but this weird thumping sound, I hope you could code it out. I'm sure you can code it out. As with BMWs, you can always just plug an OBD adapter into the OBD port, go into something like Bimmer code, and you can code certain things out. And I'm sure a lot of people will probably do that. But this weird thumping sound's a little bit weird. Yeah, didn't really like that at all. So, right, I think with my final conclusion, my last final few points, I think the pricing of the GM2, that's now what I'm now calling it in this video because G87 G series, having to repeat that over and over again is getting a little bit annoying. So the GM2, the pricing is going to be the key factor here, and whether people actually go down that route. I think it's going to be priced around about 65 grand. We know the M3, M4 is the bigger brother. It's around about 80k. The M240i sits at about 55k, so 65 is around about where I think the new GM2 will be. Obviously with finance options, BMW typically give, very good discounts on cars, so will you really be financing 60k? Probably not. Maybe they'll give you a 10 grand discount, etc, etc. At the end of the FM2, they were doing really good deals. They were doing £500 deposit, £500 a month, and so everyone bought an M2 competition and you saw them everywhere on the road. I got mine slightly before that, but I'm sure if you wait for an end of life cycle of a car, that's when you get some really good deals. So if you're really willing to wait, I guess maybe 4 years, you may be able to get a really good deal on a GM2, probably have the same aggressive deals. I'm sure if production picks up, I mean, you know what production's like these days, if it kind of picks up and BMW eventually are able to create loads of supply, they will have to be trying to shift that car before, I guess, the next M2 is going to be an electric one. They've talked about an IM2 that's coming with 1,000 brake horsepower. I mean, we don't know how true that is, take it with a pinch of salt for now, but I'm going slightly off tangent. So pricing is going to be the major key. Is it expensive in today's world? Yes, it is. Every brand new car that's come out is expensive. We've seen RS3s that are 80 grand. The used market's making cars very expensive, but I think a price of a car it only matters whether you are willing to spend that and if you think it's worth that value. So take it for how you like. that's the price I think it's going to be, and that's why it's so crucial that BMW have to kind of nail this. I actually think with kind of the new bucket options, you probably will be able to get maybe carbon ceramics as well, with kind of different options that BMW are now kind of offering. You know, on the old M2 you had 2 packs, so it was a M2 Plus pack and a Comfort pack, so a lot of customers basically spec those 2 packs and you were all pretty much good for that M2, and so pretty much every M2 F series looked exactly the same and had the same spec. But I think BMW are kind of exploring a little bit more on spec options now, and you can kind of individualize it a little bit more. You know, if they do paint to sample, individual paint, PTS is a Porsche terminology, you can see I've been converted. If they do an individual color on the M2s, that'll make them more expensive. So I think you might actually be able to spec an M2 up to 80 grand if you really tick every single option and go a little bit mad. When the configurator goes live, I'm going to do that. I'm going to see what I can get the car most expensive up to, and maybe find out and see what we can get the cheapest M2 up to as well. But it's going to be very interesting to see when it hits the market, and so like I said, price is going to be very, very key. We probably might see it fully revealed around about November, end of this year, that Joe said. I will link both of these YouTubers down below, by the way, because I've used them for a lot of my sources and references. But they will be then probably shipping the car around about February, March time. So not that long, you know, less than a year till we'll be able to see these cars around on the road. And I'm really excited. You know, it was the car that built my channel. It's a very popular car. BMW M cars are very good cars traditionally. I'm excited to see what they're like. I'm personally not really that much of a fan of the S58 versus the S55. I know it's a better engine, it's a better developed engine. Over the B58 is a newer engine over the N55 that the S55 is based on. So the S58 is a newer engine, a better engine, but I don't think it sounds that good. That's the point I'm trying to make across. I think it sounds a bit deep, even with an exhaust. It doesn't have that higher pitch, raspy sound that I've actually grown to love on the FM2. It's so distinctive. I actually think it sounds a little bit Asbo, and I quite like that raspy sound, but again, I'm going slightly off topic. So I'm excited to drive one and test one. I'm really excited to see what they're like. I liked the M240i. I think it would be a great daily. I don't think the GM2 will come as an X-Drive. Me personally, I don't think so anyway. They might do that, who knows? But I think the M3 M4 has become so heavy, almost like an M5, it needs the X-Drive to get the power down. But I think the M2 is going to be reserved for a purist, more track-focused, nimble car, that they're not going to stick an X-Drive on it and make it even heavier. That's what I think anyway, that's my speculation. Who knows? I really hope a manual comes to the UK. And, you know, this car addresses all of the issues that were in my M2 that was brought to the CS, such as carbon roof and adaptives. You now get that in the base car I've just mentioned. So yeah, I think M240i X-Drive, perfect for the road. It's a road car you can take on the track. I think the M2 is, as we saw, they've been tested in Austria on a track, is a track car that you basically can drive on the road. So I don't think there'll be an X-Drive. Hope that's been an interesting discussion. Let me know your thoughts down below, what you think, whether I'm right or wrong. Do you agree? Do you not agree? Have you read some information somewhere that actually I'm wrong? Who knows? But I thought I'd kind of jump on camera, talk to you guys, and I guess maybe the next video that we do on the M2 will probably be when I spec one up and then hopefully drive one, but we'll see. The M2 is a car that is very close to my heart. As I said, I built my channel around it. I drove it for 2 years, I went around at car meets, etc. And I feel like a Long Beach Blue M2 competition kind of became me. It kind of became a little bit of my personality. I think when you saw me, when you saw Will, you thought Long Beach Blue M2 comp, but when you saw Long Beach Blue M2 comp, you saw Will. That's kind of what I think anyway. It's very close to my heart, so I'm excited to see what the new M2 is going to be like. I'm excited to see them on the road. But yeah, I'm rambling now. It's probably been in quite a long video. Thank you very much for sticking around if you've gotten this far. I'm going to stop talking now because it's quite long. Thank you very much. Like it if you liked the video. Comment, let me know your thoughts. I'm trying to do the outro. and subscribe if you're new. So thank you very much, like, comment, subscribe, the usual, that was it. I'll see you later in the next video.